Despite record COVID cases and unemployment across the country, Mitch McConnell's coronavirus relief bill has no state and local aid, 1 additional month of pandemic unemployment insurance, liability shield for corporations. And yet, yesterday, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they embraced a $900 billion stimulus plan that's, quote, the basis for immediate bipartisan bicameral negotiations. So Washington Post economics reporter Jeffrey Stein joins me now for more details on what exactly is out there and what is going on. It's good to see you, Jeff. How are you, man?
Always good to be on the show. Always makes my week.
Good. Jeff, give us a little bit of an update here. So the $900 billion thing, I covered a lot about it yesterday. We've got like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Pat Toomey, and then some other Democrats there. They proposed this thing. It's got no stimulus checks, to be 100% clear, but it's got like a little bit of what other people want. I think it has a slight unemployment increase and all of that. Pelosi and Schumer now say this can be the basis jumping off point. What is Mitch McConnell's plan, and what does he say?
I think the big thing we're seeing here, the sort of large tectonic shift, is that Republicans feel like they have more leverage than they did before the election. President Trump was pulling the Republican Party dramatically towards being willing to spend more money for millions of Americans. And now that Joe Biden has won, Republicans are now saying that they don't want to spend money, and Democrats are eager to get any sort of deal through that could help the president-elect. Mm-hmm. So this has shifted the terrain of the debate dramatically. In the summer and fall, we were hearing stimulus discussions in the nature of $1.7 to $2 trillion. The Trump administration was trying, and with some degree of success, pushing Republicans to be open to that kind of level of spending. And Democrats were saying that's not enough. And now both sides have switched. Now McConnell is saying very openly that the Republican position is let's spend way less. His bill would spend something like 300, 400, maybe, it's sort of hard to count this, but way less than what Trump wanted to spend. And now Democrats are saying, after rejecting $1.7 trillion as inadequate, that they are on board with the $900 billion bipartisan proposal as a good framework.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. And then in terms of the developments there, because the Republican plan, is even, frankly, like it's less than it was in before times, right? Like that, it was $500 billion. This one is different, only extends it for a month or so. I guess in your reporting, is this a negotiating tactic on behalf of Senate Republicans? I tend to think they believe it. I think this really is kind of the hardened position of a substantial amount of the Senate Republican caucus. And there aren't a lot of people who are defecting. I've only seen Josh Hawley at least say that there need to be some stimulus checks to Americans. But he's the only senator to say that so far.
I think the question of what McConnell really believes and what he's actually doing is the subject of very intense speculation. The spin from people who want to think that this thing is possible is basically that McConnell's throwing a bone to the right. Just to give you one quick example of how anemic the package McConnell released yesterday was, and as you correctly pointed out, more anemic than what he proposed just a few months ago, despite a rapid increase in cases and an escalation in need. McConnell is a little confusing, but there are 3 separate issues with federal unemployment benefits. There's the base benefits that the state provides that are running out. There's a separate program that's for gig workers and the self-employed. And then there's a third thing, which is the federal supplementary unemployment benefits that comes on top of the base benefits. And for months, the Senate Republican position has been that federal supplement on unemployment benefits for tens of millions of people needs to be, at least $300 a week. That's a ton of money. And now what McConnell is saying is, let's extend the gig worker unemployment program for just 1 month and the base benefits for just one month, but leave the federal unemployment supplemental benefits at $0.
Right.
So that's a huge change in positions from the Senate Republican leadership. And when I asked McConnell's office about this, they declined to comment. They had no explanation for why they believed just a couple months ago that tens of millions of unemployed people deserve some help from the federal government and now don't. So is that a sincere shift, or is that them now expressing how they truly feel and don't feel compelled to say otherwise because they're not trying to shore up President Trump's electoral odds in November? So I wish I had a better answer. I don't know. I think we're going to have to see. There are a lot of Republicans at the same time who want something done and I think are sincere about it, Rob Portman, Joni Ernst,
Right.
Mitt Romney, the Republicans involved in this bipartisan idea. There are some Republicans who want to do at least something. So it's very hard to say where McConnell's head really is at.
Yeah, and that's the ever-present question. Can you talk about some of these other dynamics up there on Capitol Hill? We got government funding bills that are supposed to come due soon. There was some talk. I actually saw some speculation that the most likely scenario where we get any sort of pandemic relief is actually through the government funding, the cliff that we are facing now, I think, in a couple of days here. So what's going on with that?
On December 11th, the federal government is set to shut down without a government spending package. And so there's been talk of including some of the stimulus measures that are sort of the least controversial as part of that government spending deal. Now, I am sort of skeptical about, because I've been hearing this a lot too, and it makes some sense to me because, this is a must-pass vehicle, so maybe they'll just tack some things onto that. On the other hand, once you combine those two debates, what you're effectively going to be telling members is this is the stimulus plan. And so that will give a lot of incentive for Democrats to say, I'm not voting for something that the only stimulus is money for businesses. That's the only thing you're going to include in this. And it creates this situation where we could be looking at a government shutdown on top of the pandemic and economic crisis that we're already experiencing. And I kind of think at this point, it's still very likely that lawmakers just say, let's just make sure the government doesn't shut down and come back to the stimulus negotiations later. Maybe they tack on some uncontroversial things, but that is basically would require Democrats to acknowledge defeat. As I see it, they'd be saying we are okay with allowing only,
Right.
a very, very small number of moderate measures to pass here.
Yeah. Okay. So then last thing here, let's lay out the stakes. When does unemployment expire? Eviction, all of that. What's going on?
God, the list is so long, and I try to keep it all in my head at once, but it's quite difficult. So we have an eviction moratorium. 30 million people are going to be at risk of being evicted. That expires at the end of the month. 12 million people on unemployment benefits that are going to expire at the end of the month. We have more than 50 million people who are currently receiving paid family leave through a program Congress authorized in the spring. That is one that, you think about fighting the coronavirus, allowing workers to stay home and get paid if they're sick was the intention of that bill. Now, if that expires, do people go into work when they're sick? Obviously not an ideal situation during a pandemic, of course. Protections for student borrowers, the freeze in interest rates that a lot of my friends have been talking about as so critical, that is set to expire in addition to the jobless benefits. And then obviously the government shutdown looming on top of that. I'm sure there are some that I've even missed of the programs that are expiring in December. And then, of course, just the basic fact that we've gone months now with no federal unemployment benefits, no additional stimulus checks, and the number of stories just continues to increase of people living in their cars, people unable to pay for their kids' basic necessities and meals. So we are looking at a very, very dark winter. And the CDC kept ringing the alarm. They're saying this is going to be the worst period for public health in American history, potentially. And obviously the economic consequences of that are expected to be severe as well.
That's exactly right. Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on the show and letting this out, and we will see you next time, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to say the exact same things I've been saying in this program.
That's right. But people keep watching, so there you go.
There you go, yeah.
All right. See you, man. Trump's been recorded teasing a 2024 presidential bid. We're going to talk about that when Rising continues.